Hi, it's Gina here. Today I'm going to talk to you about statistics. Now, I have a degree in statistics and I have seen statistics being used very, very badly. Can't even believe that I actually have to make this video. But here I am. So, what's been going around is a lot of articles about how there is a 72% drop in births in Australia. And that is according to the ABS data that is on one of the data sets. And I just wanted to clear up a few things about that and use that as an example of how you can use your own confirmation bias to see things that aren't really true. Now that I'm not saying that there hasn't been a decline. I'm not saying that miscarriage rates aren't up or any of that, but you can't actually use the ABS data to make these judgments about the fact that births in particular are now in decline. In fact, it would be wrong to do so. With deaths, it's a totally different story, but again, there are limitations with the data. So the first thing I'll talk about is collection of data. In any study, you need to understand how that particular study collects the data. There's no standardized way that data is collected. And in this case, with births across Australia, you'll find that every state collects the data on registered births differently. Some will count a registered birth as soon as the application goes in. That's the date that they will put into the system as the month that the birth is recorded in, and others will wait until the whole thing has been completed, and they will register that birth to that month. So, for example, if you had a baby in 2021, but you didn't happen to register that birth until 2022, then that baby would be registered in the system in 2022 in a number of states and territories. So this creates a problem with the data set because you're not really able to compare month by month, and even year by year is really quite problematic using this ABS data set. Another thing is, even with deaths, exactly the same, I believe, in most territories and states in Australia. Deaths are counted when they're actually registered, which means that if a death is held up by an autopsy, let's say it's an unexpected death, then that death is not actually appearing in the data. Not now, anyway. And when it is actually recorded will obviously be months later. So we're not going to get a full picture in terms of government data as to what is actually happening. So another thing I also wanted to talk about was endpoints. So when we collect the data, there's always like a cutoff point for when that data is put into the system. So at some point, the ABS decided that they would cut off when the 2021 data would go into their system, which seems, absurd that here we are almost at the end of 2022 and the data is incomplete and it doesn't match and there's all sorts of anomalies in it. So what the hell is going on, and who's not doing their job? Now, what struck me as particularly odd was when I was going through this data set, and yes, it looked particularly odd that since all the way back to 1975, the number of registered births in Australia was fairly much, give or take, the same or similar, except for the last 2 months, which was November 2021 and December 2021. And so I thought, look, I'll look at all the data, I'll do a standard deviation. Now, standard deviation is when you assess whether the data point is outside normal ranges. So I did that for every state, and pretty much all the states in December 2021, I think all of them, were outside of the standard deviation, so therefore was abnormally low numbers of births. And then I actually looked at the raw number for Victoria, and it had recorded 21 births for the month of December 2021, which is, well, it's absurd Like, you can want to believe whatever you want, but there just was more than 21 babies born in the state of Victoria on in December 2021. So there is a real problem with reporting. And then I compared that to what the Victorian government decided to publish on the birth, deaths and marriages website, and that was, obviously it was more than 21, but also that number did not match what was in the ABS data. So, what do we have here? We have nothing. There's nothing that can be compared in terms of birth data. It's pretty shoddy. When it comes to the death data, I think it's a little bit better, because firstly we know that that because of the closed borders, the population of Australia really did not increase. And so if there is, in fact, I think it actually went down from all the people that here, who've taken off. But the thing is, when you have a recorded excess death of 17%, that is pretty phenomenal for the death data, because when you've got a stable population, you don't expect those numbers. They're quite unprecedented. So that data, but is actually probably the actual death, excess death, is probably a lot worse than 17%, simply because when you think about it, you actually have to register the death for it to be counted. And so there's a lot of autopsies that have been held up because they can't get through them all. And they're not actually counted yet. So again, we can't count month by month the trend line or anything, because that all comes down to how fast they're able to get these autopsies done and put in the system. So another thing I wanted to talk about was, there's a lot being said about high rates of miscarriage. Now, that would be done doing a sampling. So you would have to sample a population or group of people, and you would say, like, for example, a hospital might have a certain number every year go through of women, and then of those women, they might calculate the average miscarriage rate at 15%. So the total number of women, and the total number of miscarriages, so you're able to calculate a rate. When you're using the ABS data, you're not actually able to calculate the rate, because you'll have to guess the population size. And so it's easier in some ways to hide what's really going on, unless it's catastrophic, I guess, and it's a little bit harder to say there's a lot more people and dilute that rate. So when you have, a sample like that, you could potentially get two groups there, one who'd taken medication of a certain kind and one who hadn't, and work out what the rate of miscarriage was for one and what the miscarriage rate was for another. And then you would maybe look at a standard deviation as to how much that deviated from normal. And if it was a significant amount, then you would say that under the null hypothesis, you would say that particular medication was dangerous. So that is how it would be done. It wouldn't be done using raw data like on the ABS. And I guess, you can sit there and you can wait for data, or you could probably use your common sense, because that's what it really boils down to. How something works, as opposed to waiting for some medical study to tell you the obvious. Like, if, for example, you want to drink water versus soda, you don't need a study that will tell you in 20 years' time that it was probably better to drink water over drinking soda. And I think that is really it for today. I'll have a lot more to say on statistics, so tune in. There's a lot of statistics that are being used badly by a lot of people, and we really need to get back to truth. And numbers don't lie, but people do. Okay, bye.